The Afrobarometer today released its global data on democracy. The report is based on surveys done in 34 African countries, including South Africa and Zimbabwe. It focuses on African countries and how their citizens perceive democracy. Joining us now on the line is Afrobarometer's communications coordinator for Southern Africa, Gugu Nonjinge. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Let's just first start with the basic questions. Do Africans have a common understanding of democracy, its hallmarks, and even what it means?
Thank you so much for having me on the line today. I think for us, basically, when we conduct the survey with the perception that the ordinary citizen in Africa understands what democracy is. So our questioning and our survey is tailored in such a way that unpacks democracy for the respondent, and also asks follow-up questions in terms of what other type of governing policy that the respondent might prefer, and then you can kind of gauge if they say they prefer a one-party rule over a democratic rule.
So tell us broadly, what were your main findings then through your survey?
What the main findings we find that is that support for democracy in Africa, in the 34 countries that we conducted the survey, stays strong. But we've notified the dissatisfied Democrats. These are the people who actually demand democracy, but also are not satisfied with democracy. And those are the people that we find not necessarily problematic, but some people who are very alarming in the continent, because those are the ones who could actually result in democracy failing in the continent.
Okay, so we'll come back to those in just a moment, but I just want to understand, according to your survey, it says more than 7 in 10 reject abandoning multi-party elections in favor of strongman rule. Now, that's very interesting. What are the minorities saying about what they're in favor in? What are the reasons?
As I mentioned, what the survey does is to gauge citizens' perceptions on these ideologies and these political terms. What we do not do really is ask follow-up questions in terms of the reasoning that citizens would not necessarily be satisfied or prefer some sort of governing structure over the other. And I think that's something that we as civil society organizations or even governing structures need to take home and actually unpack in terms of the reasoning that our country's citizens actually say such things over democracy or over the ways their countries are being governed.
I understand that you say that you unpack it for them, but say, for instance, 3 out of 10 who say that they do prefer strongman policies or governance. What are the reasons that they're advancing?
Mostly it is, again, based on their demand for democracy and their satisfaction for democracy in their countries. When we look at the surveys as a whole in the continent, we also can kind of gauge the most important problems that some citizens in some countries often raise. In South Africa, for example, unemployment was ranked high up there, followed by security, followed by the addressing of crime and corruption in the country as the most important problem that the government needs to face. And also, you can also look into citizens' perceptions of the elections and if they have participated in the elections. And we look at, as Afrobarometer, at the non-partisan voter, where we look how many people actually support the democratic rule in South Africa, how many people actually support certain political parties, and how many people are actually willing to participate in elections. And also combining that question with seeing citizens' perceptions of democracy, their satisfaction and their demand for democracy, you kind of gauge an actual feeling of what's happening in each country.
So perhaps if you could just unpack for our listeners, when you say demand for democracy, as you explained it to your respondents, what did you say it was?
So basically what the key demand indicator for democracy that we as Afrobarometer measure, we ask the respondents based on the 3 statements that we told them. For example, in the questionnaire, democracy is preferable over any other kind of government. Second one is, in some instances, a non-democratic government can be preferable. And the third one is, for someone like me, it does not matter what kind of government we have. So majority of the people that answer the question say that they prefer democracy, which is 68%. About 78% of them, they reject presidential dictatorship. So those are the key indicators that we use to measure their demand for democracy and to also gauge their satisfaction with democracy in their countries.
Only 43% are satisfied with the way in which democracy works in their country. What are the problems or perceived problems?
Mostly what we see of what most people actually highlight as mentioned, unemployment is ranked high up there in most countries as the reason why when you're looking at government performance in service delivery, that's something that most citizens firstly take into consideration when they're about to answer such questions. So it is service delivery and also how free and fair elections in each country are. Those are the type of questions that respondents kind of dabble in as well.
Earlier on, we showed the trends and also the various countries in terms of support for democracy. Can you tell us from the highest ranking to the lowest ranking what the variables are?
The highest levels and the highest rankings of when you're looking at the trends and the supply of democracy for 18 countries, you can see actually that in countries like South Africa, the demand for democracy has declined over the years, and the supply for democracy has actually increased. However, though, as I mentioned, it is up to us as civil society to actually engage the meaning of that. What does it mean? And also, does it impact the democracy that we have as a continent or as a country?
So then let's just look at back to the dissatisfied Democrats. What do they do just to guard against backsliding?
So basically, the dissatisfied Democrat is the person that is is preferring democracy over any other type of government, but they are not satisfied with what's happening in the country or the performance of democracy in the country. So those are the people who might do anything to actually jeopardize democracy because they are not satisfied with how it works. We can see these people joining some populist groups. We can see these people not taking part in elections in each country. So we can associate them with the demographics or with an audience or the citizen audience that actually civil society and government needs to pay attention to because they do pay threats to the democracy of each country.
So obviously this is about perceptions of democracy and desire for it. But just overall, your survey, what does it tell us about Africa as a continent as a whole? Because obviously this is one continent that's been criticized for lack of architecture for democracy and the manner in which it interprets it. What is your overall sense of where we're going?
I think for me, what we need to actually take out from this survey is that across the continent, well, perceived supply of democracy is lower than the demand of democracy, meaning that just many people get less democracy than they actually want in their countries. And for the most part, Africans actually are very critical and are very judgmental when we talk about the quality of democracy that they receive. But also what we need to take into consideration is that countries vary greatly in their attitude towards democracy. We have most countries like Zambia and Mauritius who prefer democracy and reject all other forms of authoritarian rule. When we have less of that in South Africa and Burkina Faso and Madagascar and so forth. So those are the type of data and type of information that we need to grapple with, and also understanding. As much as we can understand that, there is a perception that most Africans are democratic and they prefer democracy, we need to take into consideration the dissatisfied Democrats.
All right, thank you very much, Gugu Nonjinge, Afrobarometer's communications coordinator for Africa. And it is, of course, a survey in 34 countries.